Brian McKnight has not spoken until recently. I think it highlighted how it's easy to paint a narrative towards men.
Sometimes if you don't speak up for yourself, nobody will. If we speak up, we're sassy and we're overly emotional.
It could have just been the fact that he wasn't articulating in a way that we were able to receive it.
What Brian was expressing publicly, I think, was his boundaries. Brian McKnight has not spoken until recently. We had the whole rundown, and then come to find out, I had an interview with Anton. Shout out to him for getting Brian McKnight and the conversation, because for a while, we didn't hear his side of the story. All we heard was theirs. His sons, both of them, if I'm not mistaken, went on the internet and talked about him as a father, how he was absent, et cetera, et cetera. The wife maybe made some mention of things. We saw this man who we love, right, anytime, but apparently he was having a hard time in terms of what he was dealing with. And so finally he gave his side of the story. And for me, it kind of resonated because I think it highlighted how it's easy to paint a narrative towards men because we oftentimes, as men, can't speak up. And finally, when we do, some people may have a problem with it. But I thought the interview was well done. That's number one. Number two, how people repaint narratives despite what you might do for them, and how when you stop doing for them, maybe things change, right? I thought that was fascinating. There was so many threads here. And I mean, if you believe his account of what occurred, I kind of feel like we might owe him an apology. So what are y'all thoughts in terms of, I think, the larger conversation in regards to whether or not we're so quick to believe the worst in men, especially Black men, just because we hear things on social media, right? Number one. Number two, in terms of whether or not it's expected for us to speak up for ourselves, right? And then number three, I think most importantly, is what happens when Black men set boundaries. If I'm not mistaken, his relationship was estranged with his two kids before one of them passed recently, right? He had to set boundaries according to what he said to Anton Daniels. I feel like there's a lot here to kind of unpack a little bit. So what are y'all thoughts? Feel free to start anywhere. Anytime, anywhere. What are y'all thoughts?
Well, I'm going to start back at one, right? Because when we talked about, thank you. When we talked about Brian at first, I remember thinking he was tripping. I remember like, man, you are really acting out. You out here changing names, you disowning people. Like, this girl really got your nose open. You know what I mean? And it's funny because, you know, I guess it's just human nature and our ability, our bias, right? If we don't know a story, we fill in the blanks with what we think the story most likely would be. And maybe we've heard this story so many times of a man leaving his family and being, you know, dragged off by sunshine and telling he ain't never coming home no more. And we thought that's what was going on with Brian, right? But there are two sides, three sides even to every story, right? There's his, there's hers, and there's the objective truth. And I'm glad he was able to tell his side, because a lot of times, I know myself, I've done it. I've had people talking about me and I have just been like, hey, I'm gonna keep it quiet. I'm gonna keep it solid. The truth gonna come out. And, you know, I have heard it said that lies have wings and the truth has club feet. So, yeah, the truth may make it around, but it can take a while. And sometimes you don't want to wait for that. But Brian was patient. I respect his patience. I respect the fact that he, you know, said his piece. And sometimes if you don't speak up for yourself, nobody will. To be honest, and I'll land on this, I wonder if tacitly Black men have not been painted into a corner. If we speak up, we're sassy and we're overly emotional, right? But when we stay silent, then everybody gets to run their narrative about us without our input. It's like a catch-22. You know what I mean? But kudos to him. Shout out to him for biding his time and telling his story in his time and not even letting anybody force him to talk about it before he was ready, right? And whatever you're going to say about him, whatever your opinions are about him, until you get the whole story, you too are back at one. Go ahead.
Yes.
So I too will go back just a little bit. But first, before I go back just a little bit, I want to point out that two Black men did speak on their father. So it's not all Black men who don't speak up. It was because two did speak up. However, like you said, there's his side, their side, and then there's the truth. And that's for all stories, right? So somehow, some way, there needs to be meet in the middle. In Brian's case, but since we're talking about Brian, let's go ahead and go to my side. My side, looking from the outside, was like, damn, this is fucked up what he's doing. Because the way they had the story going, since we didn't know his side, was that he basically just told his family kick rocks. And considering this whole gender divide between the Black woman and the Black man that's currently happening, it was like, and he went to a other at the same time that the passport bros continue to rise and so forth. And so this whole commentary in regards to him just disregarding his Black children, adopting two children that she had previously and having one of his own, especially when at the same time black women or black men are being told that they shouldn't be stepfathers and so forth, or don't date women or marry women with kids. And it was like he's literally doing the exact opposite, but black women was getting shitted on regardless of that particular type of conversation. So at that time, I was like, oh, this is messed up. He's disowning his family. Like, is he anti-black? Is this the anti-black Brian McKnight? I remember his concerts being canceled because his base was black women. And black women were saying, whoa, hold on a second. Not only have you abandoned your kids, now you left your wife for this woman who we believe was waiting in the wings, who's supposedly your best friend, which we're going to get to later, but was waiting in the wings this entire time. And it was just a whole hoopla. Hearing his side of the story, or vaguely hearing his side of the story somewhat, I would say that at this point, there's a lot that we didn't know, and we did rush to to make assumptions, right? And as a matter of fact, part of those assumptions was based on the fact that she put a book out there as well, highlighting some of the behavior and so forth. But then his own words and actions when he did speak spoke to some of that too. Like, so for example, saying that his kids were a product of sin, whereas this kid was created out of love. And it was like, well, damn. And rather, if his first child was created out of sin, being out of wedlock and whatnot, then that's still, what about your second child? So were all of them created out of sin? So, but then you talk about being created out of love and so forth. At the end of the day, it was just rubbing people the wrong way. And that also helped her narrative get pushed forward because some of the things that he was saying, but it could have just been the fact that he wasn't articulating in a way that we were able to receive it. While that was his truth, we were looking at it through our lens. And so I say kudos that he went ahead and shared his story. I think it's great that he's taken the time to open up. And since we are in the age of men becoming, and we're asking men to be more emotionally available, emotionally intelligent, and so forth, then at some point, we need to recognize that we need to take his story for what it is, because while it may not be her perspective, this is his perspective, and it adds additional light to what was actually happening in the situation, like especially pertaining to his kids and how he considered them ungrateful and so forth. But him providing the receipts of how they was ungrateful is another story, right? And so I'm going to go ahead and say that while I will still view Brian McKnight with side eye, um, I'm also going to give him props for getting his story out there. And I will also, and you guys hate for this, but I'm going to be accountable. I'm going to be accountable for my own prejudgment based on the information that I heard, and maybe sort of kind of give him an apology. Brian, my fault. I should have waited. Where's your book at?
Wow. Okay. Well, a heartfelt apology from S&M. Whew. I mean, I got to be honest with y'all. When I first heard about the story, I didn't really care. You know what I mean? If I'm just being a buck about it. I mean, we hear these stories, and my attitude about it is we don't really be knowing these people. We use it as fodder to have maybe more deeper conversations. The part that I missed, though, was the deeper conversation of boundaries to a certain extent, because what Brian was expressing publicly, I think, was his boundaries. And for some reason, like when he set those boundaries, we didn't understand what that meant, because how could a father maybe be estranged from his child? Like when we think about a parent, for example, let's say your kid is a crackhead, right? Just hypothetically, I've seen stories where parents have to make the tough choice, right, in terms of not enabling their children to separate themselves from their child because their child is acting or behaving in a way that they feel like is detrimental, right? So we understand in that prism, but what we don't understand it is maybe in other ways, right? According to Brian, his kids that he looked out for, held down, paid everything for up until like they were in their mid-20s, right, at some point in time ran afoul. They were not trying to be down with any type of program, and he had to set boundaries. And once he set those boundaries, according to him, that's when all the different stories started coming out, right? His kids, his sons, his namesake, his ex-wife were putting out their stories about him. Now, I get that it's easy for us to look at the lens of a woman because the story of hurt that women go through is so plentiful that, yes, right, many of us grew up in homes where our mothers were hurt a certain type of way. But what's funny, though, is that we never acknowledge, it seems like, that there are men who also get hurt in the process, or men who show up a certain type of way, right? And when those men decide to speak up, especially when they're being lied on, for example, right? Or if they can show receipts, somehow it's something else. Like it almost makes me wonder, like, do we give a fuck? Well, or at least the people who don't give a fuck, at least when the receipts come out to say, you know what, my bad, let me recheck, right? Some of y'all are so fucked up that y'all are so stuck on the bullshit that y'all can't even acknowledge how you play a part in it, right? To a certain extent. It's okay to have wrong information. But once you get some additional information, it's also okay to say, you know what, this is a human being who had an experience that didn't align with what I thought it did. And if I'm being honest, that person deserves some fucking grace because this nigga said he never loved Shorty, right? He had sex with her. He was forced to marry her at a young age, right? Before he was even old enough to even graduate from college, if he was ever going to go that route. And he did the right fucking thing for all of those years. Say what the fuck you want to say. Yeah, you know, he made money, but he ain't know that shit. The point is he did the right fucking thing. And despite all those years of doing the right fucking thing, the minute you do the wrong thing according to them, oh, now they get to be outside and besmirch you and kill you. Can you imagine what it would feel like when all you have is your name and you feel like you've done everything right, despite the fact that you've had to subjugate yourself to a loveless marriage and a relationship that you were not convicted to? But despite that, right? Despite taking your kids back and still giving Shorty the fucking child support, because it's not about the money, right? You want to be there. Despite all that, despite saying, hey man, I'm going to put you up in an apartment, I'm going to hold you down. Even if you don't fuck with me, cool. But for you to go out there publicly and besmirch my name as if I didn't fucking take care of you for all these fucking years, you mean to tell me a human being is not allowed to feel some type of way? And what's sad, right, is despite all that, assuming that it's all true, some of y'all won't give a damn, right? Which what this unearths to me is that some of y'all don't like niggas for real. And I'm sorry that the nigga that hurt you does not allow you to see a nigga as a human being. But if a person is doing what he's supposed to fucking do, right, at the end of the day, he deserves a little fucking grace. You know what I'm saying? Just a smidgen, which is why kudos to him, because if you watch the interview, he still seems somewhat unbothered. Not all the way, because what the fuck? You expect niggas to be superhuman, right? We can't show no emotion whatsoever. He can't be happy he won a lawsuit that proved the bitch was lying, right? Even if it coincidentally fell on the day that his son passed away, right? Even not being informed, according to him, of the cancer that his son had. Can you imagine as a parent what it would feel like to not feel like you could be a part of your son's life because y'all motherfuckers are tripping? You know what I'm saying? Because y'all don't got the emotional intelligence or the wherewithal to get past yourself, especially when lives are on the fucking line. And then y'all got the nerve to bring up the fact that lives are on the fucking line. Like, make that make sense, right? So all I'm saying is, like, to me, kudos to him for not only speaking out. And again, I don't know what is true or what's not true. But if you watch a person speak, because Anton Daniels, he's like anti taking on other people's kids. He's kind of anti the whole stepfather thing, right? And he was kind of trying to prove the point in regards to the money that Brian McKnight had to pay. And I could tell that Brian McKnight was being genuine because for him, it wasn't about the money. He was like, yo, she has the kids. I'm going to take care of my responsibilities. He wasn't tripping off of the money. But like after you try a person enough, after you disrespect the person enough, after you show a person your ass to kiss enough, at some point in time, that person has the right to say, fuck the fuck off. You know what I'm saying? Kick rocks. You know what I'm saying? Even if it is your own fucking kids, right? Because sometimes it be them or you. And who would not understand a person choosing themselves, right? Sometimes y'all motherfuckers are so toxic that a nigga got to decide to just step the fuck away. You know what I'm saying? And then don't let it be public too. Now I got to show that y'all are pieces of shit. I have to separate myself from y'all because out of bloodline, you get to talk your talk and people can take you seriously. It wasn't because of your singing or your hard work or your talent. The only reason why people are paying attention to you besmirching me is because of me. Can you imagine? And you got my name? I mean, what the fuck, y'all? I'm sorry. Like, so I'll conclude by saying, I get that for most of us, we don't get any of this, right? Because we're okay with abuse from family members, and we're okay with, for the sake of obligation, being in a relationship that no longer serves us. But some people are not, right? And they put up boundaries. And I'm okay with the boundaries that he set because his story made sense. He seemed to have receipts, and there's too many stories of people who overstep their fucking boundaries, who are too overly entitled, who are emotionally incapable of having real conversations. And so when I heard him, he sounded like somebody who's capable and he was confident. And the last thing was his wife, he said that for the first time, she helped him see his value. right? I get that for some of us, maybe we don't get that, but that means that for a very long time, the other women and maybe some of the other people in his life did not let him see. And I don't think people understand how important it is to be seen, to be loved for you, to be accepted, to strive, right? To grow, to glow, even. You know what I'm saying? And so for him, he found that. And kudos to him for finding it. And kudos to him for telling his truth. And kudos to Anton, despite the shit he tried to sneak in there for the fucking interview. That's all I got.